Good evening, everyone. I call to order the Monday, March 9th, 2020 meeting of the Victoria City Council. I apologize for starting a little late. Our workshop ran a few minutes over. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dana, any announcements today?
Oh, Mayor, sorry, I do have it.
Oh, here we go. I got it. Our next council workshop is scheduled for Monday, March 23rd at 5:30 p.m. Fire Chief Hager will present the Fire Department Annual Report. Parks and Recreation Director Ann Manicki will present the Park and Recreation Annual Report and will receive an update on the County Road 10 corridor study. All meetings and workshops are open to the public and held in the council chambers at City Hall unless otherwise noted. Dana, anything else?
Mayor, members of the council, sorry. In preparing the announcements, when the county road update has been postponed to April, so we've swapped in an Arboretum area transportation plan. My apologies for not catching that as part of the announcements.
Not a problem. All right. Next up, open forum. I've got one slip, Jacob, for 7.3. You want to wait until then? Is there anybody else that would like to address the council on anything else? Going once, twice? Okay, can I get a motion on the consent agenda, please?
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as noted.
Thank you. Second, please.
I'll second the motion.
Discussion. Anybody need to remove anything? Council, staff, members of the public? Hearing none. Valid motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The consent agenda is adopted. Oh, you know what? I apologize. We should probably adopt the agenda too, huh, you think? Maybe that's important? So let's kind of back up to number 5 here. Council, can I get a motion on the agenda, please?
I'll make a motion to adopt the regular agenda as written.
Thank you. Second, please.
Second?
Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda is adopted. Thank you. All right. First item of business. Item 7.1. Approve the 2020 committee and commission appointments. And council, without objection, what I'd like to do is make the motion based on our workshop discussion, and feel free that if I don't do this right to jump in. So let me begin with Parks and Rec. We have 2 3-year openings, 2 2-year openings, and 2 people that we are going to appoint as on deck 1 and on deck 2. So the motion is as follows. I hereby move that we appoint Judy Iverson and Jeanette June to the 2 2-year terms, and appoint Claudio Groppetti and Amber Huntner to the 3-year terms, appoint Brian Vincent as the on deck number 1, and John Erlinson as on deck number 2. May I get a second, please?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, those appointments are made and carry unanimously. Next up, let's do the Lakes and Water Quality Committee. As part of the discussion in the workshop, Katie Kohler agreed to switch her appointment or her request from the Planning Commission to the Lakes and Water Quality Committee. And with that, these are all 3-year terms. I hereby move that we appoint Randall Juro, that's a soft G, Ann Hoschler. Anybody know how to say her? Thank you. And then Katie Kohler. My apologies, Ann, if you heard that. But and a Katie Kohler to each 3-year terms. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, that motion carries unanimously. The last is the Planning Commission. Terry Cope withdrew his name today. Katie moved over. With that, we're going to make 2 appointments, both for 3-year terms. I hereby move that we appoint Laura Moore as one of the two openings, and we move Terry Schwarting from alternate 2 to an actual 3-year position. And finally, we appoint Christian Pedersen, to alternate number 2. Can I get a second, please?
Second motion.
Thank you. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, that motion carries unanimously. And that is all the appointments. I actually had it right. Woo-hoo!
Yay.
Any John Smiths would like to apply for a commission so that the mayor can get that name right.
Yes. Should we make that a new requirement? The thanks to everybody, and I apologize to anybody whose name I did get wrong. Next item, 7.2, approve the revised 2020 council meeting schedule. Cindy?
Yes, so before when we had a chance to look at the calendar, it was sitting right in front of me and I just didn't catch it, that we have our elections on August 11th. So we have a council meeting that's scheduled for August 10th here at the city chambers, but it is one of our polling locations. So we usually set up like the Friday before for this precinct and keep it locked up. So it would be kind of inconvenient to have the council meeting on the 10th. So just wondering if you wanted to cancel, hold it elsewhere, or reschedule it.
Council, before when we've had an unusual event, we've gone to the fire station and held our regular meeting. I think we should keep to the regular schedule and cadence. Thoughts?
I'd agree with that.
Dana?
Mayor, members of the council, thanks for recognizing me. Certainly, staff is not opposed to that. That is absolutely an option. I just want to briefly make sure you're aware of the logistics and the challenges associated with moving the meeting. We have done that in the past, and we did use the community. I believe it was the community room in the past. And because our AV equipment is not mobile, there's extra. It's very inconvenient, as Cindy noted, to do so. The quality of the recording would not be ideal, so it certainly wouldn't be ideal. But we're not opposed by any means. I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of the logistics behind the video piece of that.
That's a valid point. Thank
I
you.
would be okay
So
to come on the 3rd.
I don't mind coming on a different day for one time.
Does the 3rd work for everybody?
I think.
No, it
we
doesn't.
could Lighten up the schedule a little bit, move it to the 3rd, not have anything too controversial on there.
Well, fellow council members, I believe the schedule when I saw it, so I booked the summer vacation first week of August, and I'm locked in, because when I see your schedule, I believe it.
Okay.
So, but we could operate because we'd have a quorum.
Yeah,
We'd still have a quorum. Can we get a calendar up real quick? Is it easy? I'm fine with the 3rd. I'm also fine if the council wants to find another date.
as only one council member, I would prefer a different date, but it's a council decision.
If we cancel that meeting, we can schedule accordingly. If we know this far in advance, we can probably schedule accordingly. So we could probably cancel the meeting on the 10th and just have one council meeting in August. There's no concern around that. Would there be? Are we required to meet a certain amount of times or anything like that?
It just depends on the schedule. We were looking at the board today. It looked pretty heavy is the problem, right?
Mayor and members of the council, yes, you've got a lot of things in the queue that are kind of half-baked right now, but we'll be there this summer. We anticipate we'll be very busy with a number of things to do. You do have a number of different options here. As you've noted, you can operate with a quorum. Also, we could look for other dates. Now, generally Mondays work well because that's our traditional kind of meeting date. However, the challenge with moving it to the 17th would be, as Cindy's trying to bring up a calendar, the Park and Rec Committee meets at the dais in the council chambers. So we could do that. We could meet at a different time. So you could meet earlier, meet later. The other thing would be to move it to the 31st. That would be the last meeting in August if you're trying to keep a meeting in August. And so I don't know what schedules look like, so I don't know if there would be a quorum, but that certainly would be a possibility as well.
Oh, I can see the 30, I could do the 31st.
It's a,
Can't.
You can't?
You guys can operate without me, but I'm not going to be here on the 31st.
What about this 17th, is it?
I could do the 17th.
The Parks and Rec, couldn't they move their meeting or move their venue?
Mayor,
Go ahead.
council vote, members of the council, certainly, we would have to notice the meeting, cancel that or reschedule that and go through the proper notices, but that would be an option, as well.
It seems the simplest thing is just put it on the 3rd. The 3rd is open, least amount of disruption. I know you're going to be gone. I don't think there's anything controversial coming up.
And Mayor, members of the council, we can certainly try to schedule things accordingly. So if we know in advance, we can try to, and the other option that you have is to call a special meeting to discuss a specific topic or topics as an option.
So the council, why don't we just move it to the 3rd? If you see something coming up that you think you want to be here, we'll make sure that that's not discussed on the 3rd. We'll either discuss it before or after so that you can participate.
Fine.
You okay with that?
Yeah.
Council, consensus?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay,
Good.
so I think we'll move it to the 3rd.
Okay,
Do you need a motion on that?
Yeah.
Okay, the folks, bear with us. As we're making improvements, we don't have the motion up on the screen like we did before, so we have to find the right motion in here.
I make a,
There it is.
I got it.
There
I'll
it
make a
is.
motion to direct staff to cancel to move and reschedule the August 10th meeting to August 3rd, 2020, for the regular meeting of the city council.
Thank you.
And revise the schedule accordingly.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Second, please.
second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'm sorry. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Cindy. Is that all you needed?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Next item is 7.3. Marty, Jacob, would you like to speak first briefly? Name and address for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, my name is Jacob Steen with Larkin Hoffman Attorneys. My address is 8910 Highview Court in Victoria. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Marsh Lake Hunt Club. You all have my letter, so I will keep it concise. The club is opposed to the imposition of the tax reimbursement fee that is outlined in the amendment before you tonight. This resolution calls the fee a tax reimbursement payment, but it really is a fee that the city and the township are agreeing to jointly impose upon landowners as a precondition to annexation. Now, as Minnesota law permits, the city and the township can impose fees, but only those fees that are authorized by law. And this is not the case here. The statute does contemplate agreements whereby the city reimburses the town, but it does not allow the fees to be directly imposed against landowners, particularly as a condition to annexation. Now, this resolution does shift the burden of setting and collecting to the township, but in doing so, the concern is that you're effectively giving the township a blank check because there's no limits on what fee they impose. Now, right now, it's $500 an acre, which is the equivalent of approximately 49 years of tax reimbursement per acre. But there's no limit. There's no language that would prohibit them from, say, increasing it to $1,000 or $5,000 an acre if they determine it to be appropriate. Now, fortunately, the language does exempt wetlands, which I think is appropriate, and we appreciate that, of course. But as you know, there are other regulations and policies that do render land undevelopable. And as you'll probably remember, in March of last year, this council adopted the steep slope ordinance, which rendered approximately 17% of the club's land undevelopable. So if you are committed to going down this route, which I hope you're not, but if you are, at a minimum, I would ask that you take out other undevelopable lands due to any policy or regulation posed by the city or the state, whether it be shoreland ordinance or steep slope ordinance, or even right-of-way policies. But I hope that's not what you do. I hope that you just reject it outright. So on behalf of the club, we'd ask that you reject that tax reimbursement fee outright as unauthorized and unwise.
All right, thank you. The council may want to ask you further questions, so if you'd hold tight. Marty?
Yeah, so Mayor, member of the council, thank you. As has been stated, this item is to adopt the joint resolution approving amendments to the orderly annexation agreement between the city of Victoria and Laketown Township. Since I joined the city at the end of January and was not involved in any of the negotiations or discussions, I've kind of come on in the tail end of this process. We've asked Mark Kalstis, our planning consultant, who was part of that negotiation, to give a brief overview, answer any questions, and of course, City Attorney Bob Vos was a part of that process as well.
All right, thank you. Mark? Name and address for the record, just.
Yeah. Thank you, Honorable Mayor, Council. Mark Kaltsis, 6015 Cathcart Drive, Shorewood, Minnesota. I'm with Terramark, and I'm a consulting planner to the city. Thanks for having me tonight. I'll just do a brief overview. Anything related to the tax issue, I'll defer to City Attorney Vos. But as it relates to the agreement, the city had been working on creating an amendment to the orderly annexation agreement, which essentially covered the remaining acreage that is in Laketown Township that was originally agreed upon in the 72 agreement to be annexed to the city of Victoria. This agreement sets the framework for how the city can annex a property. Some of the key points that this agreement does for the city: one, the ability to annex future properties within the annexation agreement area solely fall to the city of Victoria, so the city can initiate and annex property without any kind of interaction with the township moving forward. This agreement then also just sets the framework for some of the things that relate to roads, that we would maintain roads that are abutting, including the entirety of the right-of-way that abuts any of the orderly annexation areas. And then it leaves in place some of the other kind of key points, one of which is the township at any time at their discretion can essentially fold and causally force the rest of the annexation area to be annexed by the city of Victoria. And so there are minor changes to what the 72 set forth in that original annexation. We've done several amendments that have done similar kind of area-focused amendments, but this one would actually govern the entirety of the rest of the remaining annexation area, and would provide the city with a mechanism and kind of process for how you would annex property moving forward, which would give the city more flexibility in being able to, from a timing standpoint and just kind of control over that land, move forward into the township. So,
Thank you. Council, questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
If you're saying that the township can just fold and then we would be forced to annex that, would we have to give them the, $6.5 million based on this agreement?
So I would defer that. It's a good question. The provision that we've included in this agreement is the same provision that was in the 1972 agreement. I don't know, Bob, if you want to address the payment.
And so, Mayor and Council, maybe sort of two-part answer, both the issue that's been raised by the Hunt Club, by Mr. Steen, as to legality of sort of what's contemplated here, and then specifically, Councilmember, your question about what would happen if the township were to say we're out of the game of being a township. We want each of the three surrounding cities to take now their part of our township in accordance with the annexation agreement. I think the short answer to your question is no. Certainly the city of Victoria wouldn't be required to make that payment. The agreement specifically says that any township imposed fee for annexation will not be imposed on the city. So it's explicit in the agreement that the city of Victoria would not be required to pay that fee. I guess the question though is, might residents of the township be asked to pay that fee? And I guess that's, I can't point to a provision in the proposed agreement that addresses that, but it's just sort of unimaginable that a township that is in effect going out of business, is no longer going to exist, would demand millions of dollars from its residents as a parting gift to the township. I mean, the township would no longer operate. So it's sort of just as a matter of practical fact, not a scenario that we even thought about, because there is nowhere for the money to go. There would
Well, that
not
was
be a
my
township.
question. Plus, my understanding is that they've made agreements with the surrounding cities to annex Laketown so that it doesn't exist anymore. So why are they actually charging?
Yeah. So, Mayor and Council, you've got the background right, council member, the 72 agreement, which was amended by a 76 agreement, and then there have been sub-agreements since then. Those original agreements from the 70s, in effect, divided Laketown Township up into 3 pieces, each of which would go to the surrounding cities. What it didn't do, though, is it didn't set any time parameters on that. It didn't set a time frame by which each of the surrounding cities had to annex
Right.
those chunks of Laketown. So the time horizon that Laketown Township will continue to exist is indeterminate. We don't know how long Laketown Township will continue to exist. And the argument they've presented, I mean, I'm not here to make their arguments, but the arguments that they've made to us through staff for the last year plus is that because their continued existence is going to go on for some period of time, and they have an operating budget that can't react immediately as they grow smaller, as parts of the township are annexed by the surrounding cities, they can't change their operating budget on a dime. Because of that, they have to continue to collect money to operate as they downsize their operations. And so that's the purpose for the payments as properties annex, is to replace the lost tax revenues that those properties would generate otherwise if they were still in the township. And that rationale is perfectly sensible, right? I mean, that rationale makes sense, I think, just on a practical level. It's also consistent with state law. State law in the 70s, when these agreements with the surrounding cities were originally created, didn't provide for payments, didn't provide for replacement of lost tax payments to townships. But in the 80s, the law regarding annexation started to change, and that was the first time that there was legislation passed that recognized the need for townships to receive some sort of reimbursement for land as that land was annexed out of the town. And so the 72 and 76 agreements didn't provide for Victoria or Chaska or Waconia to make payments to the township, but the township in more recent years has asked for, some might say demanded, those payments from the annexing cities, and we've had amendments, this city and the other cities have had amendments to provide for those payments. So, you know, you can disagree with the amounts, and we'll talk about that, I think, in a moment, and you can disagree with the mechanism, but their position, the township's position that they should get some amount of tax reimbursement payment is consistent with state law as it stands now.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
Bob, so we understand that the objection here is that the fee that Laketown Township is demanding, it far exceeds the lost tax revenue. So to your point, we can all be outraged by that. Is there do we have any recourse, or can we improve this language in any way that would be reasonable?
Well, Mayor and Council, I don't need to tell you, but I'll say it out loud anyway. It takes 2 parties to reach an agreement, and we have been at this now for in excess of a year. And of course, this reimbursement issue, this payment issue has been front and center. I mean, this is kind of the issue that kicked off the discussions, maybe sort of disagreement originally back in the end of 2018. And the city, through staff at the beginning of 2019 up to when we talked about this last about a year ago, made a number of proposals to the township for tax reimbursement payment arrangements that the city staff believed would be reasonable, and we were not able to reach agreement. I don't certainly want to point fingers, because there were plenty of good arguments made by both sides about all of those positions, but the fact of the matter is we the city and the township were not able to reach agreement on a reimbursement formula that both parties would accept. The compromise position that's now in front of you, that the township, I think as recently as today, has said they'll accept, or they've implied that they'll accept. I don't know that they actually talked about this provision today, but they met today and talked about this agreement generally. The compromise position is for the city of Victoria to say, we understand that you seek to have some reimbursement as property is annexed into Victoria. We're going to leave to you, Township, the amount of that reimbursement and frankly, the mechanism, the timing and how that payment is going to be made by your residents. Let's be clear. We're talking about township property owners that are seeking to be annexed into Victoria and the township wanting to receive reimbursement from those folks. We've just said you will have that mechanism under your own township code. You'll receive the reimbursement from your residents under that code. And once that's done, the city will be notified and then we can trigger the annexation. So we have in effect negotiated ourselves out of that discussion. To Mr. Steen's point, which again, staff is quite, we would align ourselves with the concerns that the Hunt Club has about the amount of the payment. And the staff agreed a year ago that the payment being requested then seemed hard to justify. So we align ourselves with that viewpoint. However, I don't agree with him that it's not illegal to do this. What state law says, again, you don't want me quoting state statutes, but what state law says is that, Mr. Steen is right, that state law provides for that reimbursement payment that I've been talking about, the payment for lost land to a township that is having parts of its township being annexed. The statute provides for the municipality, the city that's doing the annexing, to make that payment if that goes to a contested case. If there's a dispute between the township and a annexing city about something, payment or something else, and we have to go to a third party to resolve that dispute, in that dispute, the city will be ordered to make a tax reimbursement payment. However, the same statute starts with the following language: unless otherwise agreed to by the annexing municipality, that's us, and the affected town, when an order or other approval under this chapter annexes, there will be a payment required. So the statute specifically contemplates that there can be an agreement that is outside of the statutory language. So that's what we're doing. We're agreeing that any reimbursement that the township gets is based purely on the township's own formulas. And then last thing, and I'll stop everybody who has something to say here, I can see, the position that staff has taken that we thought we understood from the council about a year ago when we talked about this was, while we align ourselves with the concerns that the township and its residents have raised about the amount, this city council can't represent the township residents before the township board. That's just not, you are not elected by the township residents or property owners in the township. And for you to go and advocate for their interests in front of their board would be awkward and probably unprecedented. That's not what cities do.
And I think that's the key point here. These are Laketown Township residents that would need to deal with the Laketown Township Board itself. And if they try to charge exorbitant fees or too much, the residents can talk to their own board. And I don't think we as a city have any ability to impose or get in the middle of that, nor do I think we should. That's between their residents and their board as for what they want to do. Now, I agree that the amount seems excessive based on other amounts I've heard elsewhere, but I don't think Victoria and I would not support putting us in the middle of that argument between those residents and their board.
Mayor, that's my point. It would be inappropriate for us to insert ourselves into this process at this point. Is there any reason to improve the language of this agreement that might set some limits? But again, that would put us in this position of protecting the residents of Laketown Township from their township.
Mayor and council, I guess I didn't get to your point, council member. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I understand the request by Mr. Steen for there to be a cap. His letter refers to there isn't a cap in the agreement. I don't know how this city would set an appropriate cap on what the township believes its residents, its property owners must pay it to be annexed. And that is a discussion for the township board to have with its residents and property owners in the township. I don't know how the city would insert itself and negotiate language that caps that amount between the township and its own residents. That just would be awkward and, again, and arguably inappropriate.
Okay, so what we're saying then is that we're not making any deal as to the amount, so we shouldn't have any amount in there. That if the residents of Laketown Township want to annex with us, they need to make the agreement with the township.
Yes, and Mayor and Council, that's precisely if you look at the language of the agreement, the proposed agreement itself, which is in front of you, the staff report does a nice job of summarizing it, but if you look at the actual language, it's on page 5 of 9 of the agreement, paragraph 8. That's precisely, Councilmember, what the language says. It says to reimburse the township for the loss of taxable property, city may not initiate annexation. We won't start the process of annexing until such time as the township acknowledges in writing receipt of such tax reimbursement payment as it may require by resolution, provided, however, that the resolution won't require the city to make that payment. That is another way of saying we won't initiate annexation until the landowner seeking annexation and the township board are satisfied with having worked out any reimbursement that's going to be paid.
There's nothing, excuse me, Mayor.
No, go
There's-
ahead.
There's nothing in this agreement that says the city of Victoria will initiate annexation with any property owner.
There is not anything that says that.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're not making any kind of agreement for $500 an acre.
No, we're staying out of it, basically.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, and again, I can't overstate it, I can't state it too much. I mean, the failure to reach agreement on something that the staff here believed was reasonable and should come forward to you, the failure to be able to reach that agreement meant that we were not going to have any dollar amount stated. We just are not going to take a position on what the appropriate dollar amount, if any, is, including $500 an acre. And that was the number that was presented to us a year and a half ago, and we didn't agree with, so.
So in the current situation, we have landowners that are interested in doing some development. Have those landowners agreed to pay the $500 to the township?
They understand the fee. Nobody's paid that fee
Nobody's paid it, has,
at this point.
Because nobody's been
Because
annexed.
nobody's, yeah, they would have to pay it in order to be annexed, which would, in our review, that would come after we would grant likely preliminary plat to a property so that they would then have some sort of a land right to kind of fall back on to then go make the payment to seek annexation. So the developers we've been working with all know what this dollar amount is, but we haven't seen it. I will just tell you, it's somewhat irrelevant, but many of the cities in this area, Carver County specifically, with other townships in this area, this is what I would call kind of a standard of practice right now, is this $500 fee. That fee's been around in some of the cities I represent since the mid-2000s. So
Exactly.
this is just an arbitrary number, and it's what they've determined is the right number, but it isn't unique to this agreement. This is widespread throughout, not just the metro, but the state.
Is this the same as the other cities that are annexing Laketown?
So it varies, and Bob could speak to his clients too, but I've seen it both ways. I've seen it where the city actually takes the fee and then makes the payment back to the township. And I've seen it where it's set up like this, where the city just 100% stays out of it, says, all we want is verification that the fee's been satisfied with the township, and that will be our trigger for annexation. And that's the way that we're recommending. That's how this agreement's written.
Mayor, if I just may add to that, I realize we're getting down to the minutia here, but the point you raised, Councilmember, is important. The more typical language that I'm seeing in these agreements where a township is seeking a per acre fee is that the agreement will provide that the city, the annexing city, will be obligated to pay that fee, that per acre dollar amount to the township. And then the language of the agreement says, but the city can require that the annexing landowner reimburse the city for that payment. That causes me legal concern, and we moved away from that language because, as Mr. Steen points out, there needs to be legal authority for the city to demand payments from people. And I don't know what the authority would be for the city of Victoria to make a payment of $500 an acre to Laketown Township and then turn around and demand that the owners being annexed into the city pay the city of Victoria $500 an acre for the right to be annexed into the city. I'm not aware of that authority, and so we didn't want to agree to that language, and we haven't agreed to that language. Any payment arrangements between the resident of the township, the property owner in the township, and the township before Victoria initiates annexation.
Do we know what agreement Chaska and Waconia have?
Mayor and Council, Anecdotally, I know I've been told that. I don't think I have that at the tip of my brain right now, though, but I think it's consistent with generally, I can't swear that it's 500 an acre in both of those, but I think it's generally consistent with, I think that the township has taken the same position with the other two cities.
Well, going forward with consistency, what are the neighboring cities doing with these kind of agreements?
Right.
Are we just switching over and everybody else has switched made amendments to their agreements long ago? Is that?
Yeah, this, Councilmember, yeah, I believe that to be the case. I think that this has been a ongoing switchover as the agreements have either come into play for some reason, whether it's an adjustment of a boundary or something that was previously agreed to needed to be amended. As these agreements have been amended, the townships, Laketown specifically, but other townships in Carver County, represented by the same people, have demanded this fee be added into the agreement. And so we're just, I mean, we've made this once before, I believe, in one of our agreements we had, but it covered just one piece of the.
But the trend is to go away from the city getting in the middle of that and then letting the township work with their own residents, let them work it out, whatever the fee is, and not put us in the middle of it.
Right.
So the question was, everybody around us is doing just that. Is that true?
Everybody is doing just that. They're either already subject to this fee through an agreement, and that could be city collecting, or if they're amending, they're looking at it probably the same through the same.
Okay,
lens.
that's the question. Have other communities around us in this agreement, Chaska and Waconia, have they already changed their agreements so that they'd have the same premise that we do?
My understanding is, and I haven't seen their most recent, but my understanding is both Waconia and Chaska have a per acre fee now established. I don't know who the collecting body is.
Okay, so you don't know.
I would like to know that before I make
Yeah, and the other thing that bothers me about this is all logical, but we are intentionally probably slowing down development that is going to occur. We're basically slowing ourselves down here because we can't get this resolved. Is that a fair assumption?
I don't think that's.
I don't think that's right.
We can't get developers coming forward to put these agreements together. So I don't think it has anything to do with this annexation agreement.
I don't think developers are shying away from us because of this $500.
No.
Correct.
That's my point, is the $500 is insignificant to the development.
Well, Mayor and Council, again, we're a little out of school here, speaking for other parties' interests, but yes, I've certainly heard from large national developers that the time value of money, getting a project that's wanted to move forward, is far more valuable than $500 an acre.
Exactly. So this is very serious what we're trying to do here. We should really understand what we're doing to ourselves.
And then just, Mayor and Council, anecdotally, I guess Mark and I should have shared notes more carefully. I think that this idea that the city won't be in the middle of the discussion about the fee payment, this language that says township and your residents, you'll work that out and then let us know when that's done, and then we'll go forward with annexation. I think we're actually tracking Waconia on that. I think Waconia has similar language to that. I don't think we have verbatim the same arrangement, but I think they have a similar arrangement. I don't know about Chaska, but as Mark said, and I agree, there are lots of now annexation agreements out there that provide for a city to be making a relatively large per acre payment to a township as a fee for annexation. And again, I've told you, I've heard rumblings that may be challenged, and the party that's going to get challenged in that is the city, right? The city will have agreed to make a $500 an acre payment to the town, will have made that payment, and then will demand reimbursement from a party being annexed who will refuse and say, you have no authority to require that of me, and that's where the challenge will occur. So we've avoided that with this language. This language should not allow the city to be challenged, at least on that. Obviously, anybody can sue anybody for anything, but that should not be a basis for a challenge to this language.
Question, if a property owner is able to negotiate a different cost with the township, let's say they can negotiate $100 an acre with the township, what do we pay the 100? We're out of that.
Under no circumstance under this language would Victoria write a check to Laketown Township.
Okay.
There is just no arrangement where that would occur. And I will tell you, again, I'm speaking a little out of school, but I think we're led to understand that Laketown Township's position has been and is going to remain that they aren't negotiating this fee, that they're setting it by ordinance or setting it by resolution, and that it's not negotiable. Now, I don't know in the real politic world what's going on, but I am led to understand that they're going to set a fee, and that's the fee.
My position on this, Mayor and Council, we should not drag our feet on this any longer. We've been working with Laketown Township for a year and a half. I trust that our staff has done the very best they can to get the best arrangement and agreement possible. And I think by delaying this so we can compare notes with neighboring cities is just delaying the inevitable. So on that, I would make a motion that we adopt the joint resolution approving amendments to the orderly annexation agreement between the City of Victoria and Laketown Township.
Thank you. Can I get a second, please? I'll second it. Further discussion? I agree with you. I don't think this is going to change anything, and I don't want to put the city in the middle of this, right? To your point, landowners in Laketown Township can negotiate with their board, and if they want to come up with a different fee as part of the negotiation, that's fine. If the landowners in Laketown Township feel they're losing value or they can't develop because of this, that's something they need to take up with their board. We shouldn't be in the middle of that. And I don't think this fee, when you start think a 10-acre development, $500, that's, what is that, $5,000 bucks? If you're doing a 10-acre development, that's a pittance in scope, if you will. 100-acre site, right? You've got $50,000, still a pittance in scope for a 100-acre site. So I want to move forward with this.
With that said, I just think this is a good agreement. I like it. I think it's a good solution to a difficult problem, and puts us squarely on the outside and let the landowner deal with their own township board. That's a good thing.
All right. Further discussion?
One further comment. My previous comments were made on the fact that this is good language. How come it's taken us so long to do it? Really? No, I mean.
The negotiation process was difficult. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, there were some other, I would say, much more modest modifications in recent months that you see in the memo in front of you that were not really controversial, but just, government takes time to work these things through. The township individually analyzes provisions and goes to the board with each provision, and so it's just taken some time to get the final document ready to go.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Gregory, any final comments?
No, sir.
All right. We have a valid motion. If there's no further comments, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Okay, thank you. Round table. Councilmember McMillan.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, council members, last meeting, Councilmember Black brought before us an ordinance for consideration. And after we had our discussion, I felt we squandered an opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the trends that we're seeing in local government. So I brought this thing back, and I want to talk about that. So kind of using, if you remember correctly, I'll refresh people's memory. Councilmember Black brought before an ordinance that said the City of Victoria does not want to do business with a pet shop that might buy their pets from a puppy mill. Basically, that's the language. If everybody's in agreement on that. So we kind of shut it down because there's not a pet store shopping right now to be in the City of Victoria, but it brings to mind and it brings to the forefront sort of this trend in local government where advocates and activists are bringing ordinances to city councils to be adopted. So a couple of things that I wanted to bring up for the council to consider is maybe kind of a thought process that I've sort of adopted when I consider these things. So the city is a governmental unit whose job is to provide services to the residents and businesses. So if you think drink, drive, and flush, that's what we're here to do. So when somebody brings an ordinance like this forward, we say, why is Victoria the right place for this? Who's bringing the idea forward? Are they trying to, who's bringing it forward? is this governed by another unit of government? So if you think about pets, for instance, or animals, both the federal and the state government already take care of and say, this is how you're supposed to humanely manage animals. So why Victoria? Why should Victoria take on another responsibility above and beyond what the state and the state and federal government already do? What would the impact to Victoria residents and businesses be? We all hate puppy mills, right? Nobody wants to be part of a puppy mill. But on an impactful level to our Victoria businesses and residents, it doesn't move the needle at all if we adopt an ordinance that makes us feel good and is very symbolic. Does this ordinance favor one business or a type of business over another? Or does it favor a resident over another? And does it impact the free market system? I think these are all really good questions to ask when an ordinance like this comes forward. If we use the example of we don't want a commercial breeder to be able to sell their dogs within a pet store here, does that favor the Humane Society? And maybe that's a good thing. But I think we don't want government overreach to take the place of people's own decisions, people's own responsibilities, and let people decide how they want to spend their money. If their value system says, I would rather adopt a dog from the Humane Society than go to a professional breeder and get one of those dogs, I think let those people speak for themselves. We don't need that government overreach. And then again, how will this ordinance be enforced? So I can't imagine how we would ever go down the path of trying to figure out where a pet store could be located in the city of Victoria gets its animal supply from. That would be onerous for our staff to consider. And then I would think about what message this sends. What is this message sending to our current businesses? Will our coffee shops start worrying about where their coffee beans are coming from? Does all the chicken sold in our restaurants have to be free-range chicken? And I think that this is government overreach at its best. To developers, if we're so anxious to adopt ordinances, even though it's not even on the horizon that we're going to have a pet store, what other things would we be willing to do? And I think development considers that. We talked about, opening the door for similar requests, the chicken, the coffee beans, any of those kinds of things. And I don't think it's the job of this council to replace consumer choice or the responsibility to spend the money how they want to spend it. And finally, unintended consequences. Oftentimes when you adopt an ordinance that feels really good, you don't consider the unintended consequences of this. And we have lots of examples in local government. Raising the smoking age from 18 to 21. That feels good. Nobody wants to have kids smoking. But what it does is it creates this patchwork of ordinance from city to city where people are just moving their business based on where they can get the products they want and need. And it interferes with the free market and consumers. And I think it's incumbent on us to consider these things as we get ordinances that come forward. So thank you for that. I'd love to have this discussion if everybody completely disagrees with me or.
No, I think you make valid points. Unless government's better government. So unless we're solving a problem, don't create a solution.
Thank you for triggering that, because that should be the first thing, is what problem are we trying to solve?
Well, I think the problem that we're trying to solve is one that hasn't happened yet, and we're trying to make sure it doesn't happen. The one thing that I have learned is that people.
Okay, let me interject here. I don't want to create an agenda item here and get into discussion. The round
This is a round table.
Right, but if we start getting into discussions about the pros and cons of this, that becomes an agenda item. So I want to avoid that, right? The roundtable is a brief discussion to determine whether or not we're going to direct staff to research something. So Deb made a comment, maybe this belongs in reports instead of a roundtable, but because you're not asking staff to do anything here other than
I'm not.
just the comments.
No, I didn't want to let that opportunity to have this. We just didn't discuss that, and maybe that was the appropriate time to have that discussion. But I did want to bring forth we shut that down pretty quickly, and I wanted to have, we did, and I wanted to bring forth some of these ideas about why I shut that down, why we shut it down pretty quickly.
Valid point. So
so-
let's do this. Do we want to direct staff to put this as an agenda item so that we can have a more in-depth discussion? Because I don't want to create a discussion.
I would like, when we go through the ordinances and we get to the animals, because it needs to be updated because it's not correct, I would like to bring this forward then.
Okay.
So, but at that point in time, my question would be, what are we going to do that the federal and the state government doesn't already do?
I'll get the answer for you.
All right. So we're not going to direct staff to do anything at this time. You'll bring this back at a later time when appropriate ordinances come up for review.
Right.
Okay. So there's a consensus. We're not going to direct staff to do anything on this item?
No, I'm not asking for anything.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you. Reports. Bob? Dana?
Mayor, I don't, thank you.
Yep, Dana?
Mayor, members of the council, just a couple things for our residents. Our 2020 budget book, this is a hard copy, but electronically it's available online. So if anybody is interested in seeing our 2020 budget, all that information should be available on our website under departments and finance, right on that main page. If anyone's having a hard time trying to find that, we'd be happy to walk them through this. They can contact anybody at City Hall. The only other thing I'd like to point out tonight is our new artwork. We have a new exhibition here, and so this exhibition we're really excited about. It highlights a number of local artists, not just one. And these, as you might note, are all portraits, and it might be difficult for those at home to see. But anytime our City Hall is open, we welcome our residents and visitors to come to City Hall and look at the exhibitions. They switch out every 2 months. And with this one, I just like to highlight that if anybody sees something that they really like, this could be, and really it's an opportunity to promote the artists who do these type of portrait work, that if you're thinking about a family portrait or to have something done either for yourself or for your family member and one of these speaks to you in terms of style, we do have the artist contact cards and information here. And it's just a really great way to support our local artists and our local art community and to get some really neat, memorable artwork for families.
Thank you. Council members, anyone have a report?
No, nothing.
No, I just, one thing I just want to point out, just as a information point, can we bring up those two, those slides I sent you? Don't worry, guys, this won't take more than an hour. I just wanted to note that when we talked about the Green Steps program and we discussed it, I just found it extremely interesting. The Green Steps program, before the council discussed it, the Metropolitan Council logo was listed big on their website. After this council discussed it, you'll notice that all of a sudden the Met Council logo was removed. So make of that what you will. I just found it extremely interesting that after we talked about where they get their major funds from, all of a sudden there was a change on the Green Steps website. So nothing really to discuss. I just wanted to point that out. So if there's nothing else, can I get a motion?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Second, please.
Second?
A second. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.